Christensen talked about this idea that when you create new industries, when you're doing disruptive innovation, oftentimes, well, it usually favors the new entrant. Usually the incumbent is at a disadvantage for a variety of reasons, including the reason that it's not always in their best interest to do that. They've got a market to protect and defend, but they also have new ideas, new specialties in a specific area. And we would need to take time to spend on the curve. But the idea of the model that we built on is the idea that if you're looking very early in a life cycle,
Hi, everyone. This is Joshua Hoffman and Alex Gerashenko, and welcome to another episode of the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast, where we deconstruct the why and how agency owners found their success and learn a little bit more about how they help their clients. Today, I have Dr. Wilson Zehr, the founder and CEO of Zehr, which serves as the fastest and easiest way to grow your business using direct mail. Welcome, Wilson.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on with us.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
And I think we're ready to rock and roll here. No, that was a joke we made right before the calling. So I want to, as I mentioned, right before we started the recording, I want to jump around a little bit during this episode because we did have a discovery call. And we talked about a lot of great topics on that call. But the topic that I want to start with is the idea of these pub talks. So can you explain what that is and why you do it?
All right. So the idea of a pub talk, I should probably give you a little context first. The reason why that started is because I was working on, I teach at the university level from time to time when I'm in between ventures usually. And the topics I usually teach are marketing, entrepreneurship, finance, and business strategy. And so in the course of building an entrepreneurship program at Eastern Oregon University, we offer classes, we offer local programs, we take on consulting engagements with startups, with local businesses. But one of the things that I remember reading about, in the early incarnation of Zehr, we were actually a portfolio company of Draper Fisher Jurvetson. Tim Draper was actually an individual investor, and DFJ is kind of a tier one California VC. They invested in like Hotmail and Skype and a bunch of other things. So Tim once he told me that one of the things that people need, we always hear people talk in the industry. We talk about you need the expertise, you need people with the skills, and you need the money, the finance. But he said the other thing that people really need is heroes. They need people they can look at and said, if that person can do it, I can do it too. And we need more heroes in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so one of the things we started doing is putting together pub talks. So the idea of a pub talk was that we create a, kind of an informal environment. And in our case, we had a pub that the entrepreneurial program at Eastern Oregon University participated in creating. But it's a pretty casual environment. We set it up so that we can live stream from that location. We invite in entrepreneurs and we invite them to tell us about their entrepreneurial journey. And we're more interested, rather than in fundamentals and more academic stuff, we're more interested in, what that journey looked like. What was the inspiration? What are the obstacles you ran into along the way? How did you overcome those obstacles? What advice would you have for others starting down your path? And share some stories. So, help us live it with you. And give them a chance to tell that story. And then we have a live audience there to ask questions, interact with, but we also live stream it at the same time and get feedback. Within the university environment, it turns out that they're a little easier to do because we have all the audio and video facilities, right? We can get a camera person and sound person on site, get that all set up is pretty straightforward because the university has a team that does that. And we had lots of interesting people. We got, Rick Miller, who started Avramare Healthcare. It's an assisted living provider, biggest assisted living provider in the Northwest. We had one of the co-founders of Voodoo Donuts. It was pretty interesting. Trey Shannon. I had a country music star that I know who was from that area, who started originally, started out in LeGrand, moved to Spokane, was very big into country music, country music experience in Spokane, but there was of course you have to go to Nashville. You want to be in country music, so she moved to Nashville, ended up doing some parts in Frozen and working with Dolly Parton and recording a lot of stuff. You can see her on NicoleLewis.com online. She's really talented, but she told us all about it. And within the university, we had classes work on what does the music industry look like? How does a person make money? How do they build their brand? It turns out that most of the music money's in what music, people used to make albums. They used to get signed to make albums, but now it's all about streaming, and it's harder to make money streaming. So then you're looking at appearances or maybe merchandise or other kinds of things. So dissecting the industry, thinking about how artists fit and how you would really grow your career in the modern day. So we worked on those projects together, but we also had this live stream to let her be a hero and inform others who might want to take that same path. And we're also looking at unconventional entrepreneurs. I mean, if you may not think of a country music star that way, but she's got a brand, she's got a product, she's promoting herself, she's being successful. It's just as entrepreneurial as coming up with a new type of pico de gallo and trying to get new seasons to carry it. But think about somebody who's a basketball player, a baseball player. They've got a brand, right? And they're selling a product, and they have to be able to monetize that. And so there's all these unconventional entrepreneurs, too, that we spend time with and we hope we can learn from. And along the way, we hope we can add value for them, too. So that's the concept. And you see a small piece of that on the website, on the Wilson Zehr website.
And I guess to stay on the topic of, supporting students and getting them value, I think also, we talked about how you built several capstone programs for a few universities. So I guess, I was wondering when I was prepping for this, what do you make sure that you include in those capstone projects? And what do you think is the most important thing that students get out of the capstone project?
The capstone, that's a great question. It's a great question. It gets right to the heart of it. I mean, it's the idea of a capstone program should be that it brings together everything that you've learned along the way. It allows you to apply that knowledge so that when so not only does it enrich the learning experience, but when you show up to work, you actually know how those tools work and how they fit together and why they're important. So the way we usually do that, or the way we've done that in the programs that I've created or helped create, is we usually build it around the business strategy program, mainly because business strategy, 495, I think, it's either 495, 498, depending on that university, but it's usually the last class you're supposed to take it. The students jump around a little bit, but it should be the last class you take before you graduate. And so what we do in that class is we spend our time working through business strategy. What does that look like, right? From, kind of from beginning to end. But at the same time, in our programs, students are required to complete a live consulting engagement with a community partner. And that community might be a state and local government agency, might be a local nonprofit, might be a regular commercial enterprise. We've done I think at Eastern Oregon University, over the course of time I was there, we did almost 100, I think 98 of those projects, completed them. And basically, the customer comes to us, the customer, I'm using that, whether it's a nonprofit or government agency, I'm still calling them a customer. They come to us and say, here's a problem that's important to me, and I'm not sure how to solve it. And so we'll assign student teams to it. We'll talk about it together in class as we're working through the regular class material and see how we can apply those principles to it. We look at the problem as a class, right, as a whole group, even though one team is responsible for it. That team will require will need to write a statement of work. They'll need to tell the customer what needs to be delivered and when it will be delivered. And at the end of the semester, they will do a presentation where they present their ideas, and they need to defend those ideas if there's any pushback from the customer. And I work with them along the way to do that. It's interesting for me because the variety of problems is really different. It changes all the time. But one of the really cool things that you see happening is that students, when you first lay out this project, they just, kind of all the blood drains out of their face, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, what did I get myself into?" And they're really nervous about it. And because like any real world project, like I'm not out of the textbook, any real world project, things are not always clearly defined. There's squishiness, and you almost never have complete information, right? There's holes in that information, and you need to use what you have to work with. And you need to make assumptions to do that. So you need to try and make the best assumptions. And it may be that there is no right answer. There might be a series of right answers, wrong answers, depending on who they're for. It may be that there's only you need to pick the least worst of the bad outcomes. Right? Maybe there's not a good outcome, but you're trying to minimize the negative impact for the client you're working with. So there's a whole range of things like that we have to deal with, and the students, they have to come to grips with that. You see people are very nervous the first 3 or 4 weeks. And then all of a sudden something, they look like deer in the headlights. And along the way, somewhere, especially as we're talking about it as a class, something clicks, and they see, I got this, I can do this, right? And they come together as a group and deliver it. And I've never had a team that hasn't delivered their project and haven't added value for the customer and added value for themselves as well. And it's usually something, the other benefit is something you can add to your resume. You've completed a consulting project for a live customer, that goes on your resume.
I have a lot of problems with the current education system. I think I wrote my 12th grade paper on why No Child Left Behind was a bad idea and all this stuff. But where I really agree with you, where I really agree with you is, a lot of school teaches you that there's one right answer out of these 4 options. And you have to pick out one of those 4. And I don't think that's real life. Like you were saying, there's not always a clear answer to a solution. But I think a lot of schooling kind of says that, especially in high school, it says, there's not a lot of creative work. And so there's one answer to this one question. And I think you're kind of highlighting that that's not always the case. But I want to actually kind of double click on a topic that you started to get into, and it was actually the idea that you said, like, the albums turning into streaming and how people have to learn how to adapt. And I guess I want to loosely tie all of that into a conversation about innovation, because as we talked about last time, innovation kind of tends to happen in waves, and it comes in waves, and each innovation often comes with supporting technologies that often, lead to the next wave. So I know this is something I believe you wrote a paper on, and we've seen this lead to, making some jobs obsolete, the album into streaming. I think that changed the entire music industry. But it also creates new categories of jobs. So if this is something that you are comfortable talking about, again, I think you talked about creative destruction by Joseph Schumpeter, and then you wrote a paper on this. Can you kind of just dive into this a little bit?
Yeah, no, I did my PhD dissertation on innovation and the types of innovation that are most useful at different stages in the life cycle. Schumpeter was an economist that was was old school economist, 30s and the 40s. So he did a lot of writing on this idea of creative destruction. So this idea that old industries are destroyed and new industries emerge and destroy old industries, but they create new opportunities as well. So, without going too far in the weeds, I mean, think about something like Standard Oil. Standard Oil was originally Rockefeller created that to sell kerosene for people to light their houses and heat their houses. And then, of course, there was the invention of electricity threatened to put them out of business. But then, of course, there was the automobile industry that showed up, and internal combustion engines, and they started creating gasoline. And there was another wave of innovation and, businesses that flourished from that. In Rockefeller's case, he was helped by by antitrust legislation to become the richest man in America. But it was a interesting transition, of an industry, and they were able to master that. But there's lots of different examples of that, and usually, what the literature tells us, if for example, if you look at stuff by Christensen, Clayton Christensen, he wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, and a bunch of related stuff. But he talks about, well, we're missing a step, I guess. So there's Schumpeter, who talks about innovation and creative destruction. There's this idea, a professor named Rogers wrote something called, adoption. He looks at adoption of innovation over time. So you've got this curve of innovation, you've got early adopters, mainstream market, late adopters. So you see that normal curve, and that's popular in the literature these days. And then, Christensen talked about this idea that when you create new industries, when you're doing disruptive, what he called disruptive innovation, oftentimes, it usually favors the new entrant. Usually, the incumbent is at a disadvantage for a variety of reasons, including the reason that it's not always in their best interest to do that. They've got a market to protect and defend, but they also have new ideas, new specialties in a specific area. And we would need to, I guess we'd need to take time to spend on the curve. But the idea of the model that we built on is the idea that if you're looking very early in a life cycle, I'm sorry, in real time, I'm trying to understand which pieces are important and which pieces aren't.
Please, yeah. But
typically, when you have let's just talk really briefly about the S curve of innovation. So the S curve is, if you're looking at that adoption life cycle, if you look at the speed of adoption, that gives you an S curve. And along that S curve, when you have a new innovation, you tend to have a cluster of new innovations, right? If you think about when this consumer smartphone came out, and by the way, that wasn't the invention of the smartphone. BlackBerry and others did that 10 years before Apple created their first iPhone. But, when they did that, there was the BlackBerry that was there. There was the iPhone. There was the, Samsung's offering. And there was a cluster of others. People like HP and Compaq were in that space even. And what tends to happen as a market is it tends to consolidate on a dominant architecture. So one particular form of innovation. So in this case, we pretty much here in the US, we've got the iPhone and we've got the Android offerings. And then as people adopt those and those begin to mature, people tend to do something called incremental innovation, which means, think about when you get a new iPhone release and people are, people are increasing battery life, or they're increasing the number of pixels, or they're doing, so they're enhancing the device, but not really disrupting the market or creating another market path. So that disruption comes when somebody has a new invention that creates a new S curve, and that pattern starts all over. And so the folks on that new S curve, typically, according to Clayton Christensen, are at an advantage against the incumbents. So to provide an example that's not cell phones, think about Uber, right, and the taxi industry, right? So we've got the taxi providers. They're a lot of cities, they have the medallions and the licensing, and they're too expensive, and people think they're not safe. They've got a lot of problems, but it's a protected industry. It's been around for a long time. And they adopted radio technology, computer technology. They're doing some incremental innovation. But all of a sudden comes Uber, and the whole idea of Uber was that I've got a bunch of people who want rides and don't want to deal with all of that, but I have a bunch of people who have resources, right? They have a car in their driveway. They'd love to provide rides, but they don't have any way to connect each other. So they provided the software that connect riders with people who are willing to give rides, which circumvented the taxi industry. And of course, in a lot of places, it's just replaced it. In that case, right, if you're a cab operator, how do you respond to that? I mean, you can try to do your own app, but you've got a whole business that's built around these excess margins, and you've got labor requirements, and you've got state regulations, and a bunch of other stuff to deal with. So you're at a complete disadvantage. And that story's not completely written yet. I mean, I saw. Yesterday, I read an article saying Portland had just, in Oregon, was it Oregon or Seattle? I don't know. Anyway, in the Northwest, they just put a new fee on those kind of rideshare services, what they're calling a rideshare service, and I'm not sure how they justified it. But it's once again a way that increases the cost. And at some point, when I think the big issue in that industry has been this idea that if somebody spends enough time doing that, should you treat them like an employee? And if you treat them like an employee, do they get unemployment benefits? Do they get medical insurance? Which of course increases the cost and breaks the model. And that's not what any of the the original people they were targeting to give rides, that's not what they really wanted either. They wanted a way to monetize the car in their driveway. They're not necessarily looking for work in that way.
When actually, just to add to that story really quick on the Uber side, and people, innovation happening, but sometimes people not recognize it. I know it's a pretty famous story that early investors in Uber, they didn't really pick up on the innovation. They said, oh, you're just taking a small part of a small pie, which was taxi driving, and you're really just a black car service. But what they didn't realize is that Uber was actually going to increase the size of the pie, so with the number of people asking for rides. And I know that's just a popular story that's usually brought up when you talk about the Uber and taxi kind of story.
Well, no, and it makes complete sense. I mean, if you think about economics, this whole idea of price elasticity, right? As costs come down, volumes kind of increase, and so if you're, if you're in the right kind of industry, reducing costs, well, it could expand the market size dramatically. And of course, they're doing other kinds of, they say, well, now that we have this technology, what are the other ways we can use it? And that creates all kinds of opportunities too. And that goes back to your thing about waves, right? Technology tends to build on each other. I mean, I've got a diagram where we look at the technology industry, because that's the industry I've spent most of my career in and done most of my research in. But, if you think about the internet has been around for, I don't know, since the 50s in one form or another. We didn't really, the average person never got access to it till 1994, 95, when the first commercial browsers were available and somebody created the World Wide Web. But the internet, they had to create servers and networking and Ethernet and TCP/IP and operating systems that could do that. And then all the applications. Turns out email's a killer application, but we didn't start out with email. I mean, somebody had to create that. And so each of these different layers just builds on each other and creates additional opportunities. So I had this discussion the other day with somebody, and I know it's a popular industry right now to talk about AI, how AI is going to kill everybody's job. And what history tells me is that it will reduce some opportunities, especially stuff that's systematic and repetitive, things that maybe people shouldn't be doing anyway. but it'll also create opportunities, and it's likely that it'll create many more opportunities than it actually eliminates. So I mean, I'm not really worried about that technology at all. I'm more worried about the misapplication of it, people trying to use it to solve problems it's not well suited for, than I am about it eliminating everybody's job.
Do you have guidance from a business strategy perspective for business owners that are trying to make sense of the new tools that are available and how they can use it, how to think about what it will do to potentially the services or products that they're currently providing, potentially those services or products becoming obsolete? Like from a business strategy standpoint, how do you even start thinking about what's happening with AI? Things are changing every day. How do you, as a business owner, keep up with that and understand how to plan for the future?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alex. And I think, I mean, I would tend to turn that around. I mean, let me provide a short example. I started my career as an auto mechanic, oddly enough. I grew up as a kid, I was kind of a gearhead. I built a lot of hot rods and race cars and stuff like that. And so when I went looking for work before I went to college, I ended up working in a shop, an auto repair shop. And somebody comes in a car, it's got, clunking under the hood. I don't come running out with a crescent wrench and saying, where can I twist something? I mean, the way we do is the typical approach is to back up and look at it, say, where's it coming from? Is it getting spark? Is it getting fuel? What are the symptoms? And then based on our diagnosis, and in business, root cause analysis, then we try to find the right tool to fix the problem or address the problem. So that's when you're thinking about your business, I would say strategically, you need to step back and think about your business. What's our market? What's strategic? What are we trying to accomplish? And then based on that, decide what tools make sense within that context. You may find that in your particular market segment or with your offering that AI does not play a very big role. In some cases, you may find that it plays a very big role. If it plays a very big role, you have to understand that if you have those skills, right? And if I don't have those skills, how am I going to get them? If do I find another business opportunity or do I acquire the skills? And if I want to acquire the skills, I have a decision whether I'm going to, build them or acquire them or buy them or partner with somebody else who has them. And that's the way to get to an actionable strategy. And in particular, we like to talk about strategies that allow us to preserve a competitive advantage. And so sustainable competitive advantage should be the goal. Sustainable competitive advantage comes from, and sorry if this is, I know it's not supposed to be a academic lecture, but sustainable competitive advantage comes
relevant to business owners.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
I was going to say it's relevant to business owners, so go in.
Yeah. So sustainable competitive advantage comes from a strategy that's built around core competencies. So if you think about a business, businesses have resources and they have capabilities, right? So the resources are the things we have to work with, capital and equipment and, intellectual property, what have you. So we have resources and we have capabilities. So we have the ability to transform those resources into something. And then core competencies are the capabilities that we have that are unique to our organization. So they're important competencies, so not just, pedestrian. So they're valuable, unique, difficult to imitate. And to the extent I can build a business strategy around those core competencies, it becomes harder to dislodge, us as an organization from the marketplace. It allows us to be successful vis-a-vis our competitors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
I know that's a lot. Sorry.
No. Basically, what you're saying, hold on, just one second. Is basically like if a business owner finds themselves kind of questioning, like, are we going to get overrun by the enhancements that are happening in technology, either a service or product, or how can we use it? Really, you're saying take a step back and really understand what resources do you have at the moment, and what are your skills, what are your core competencies that you're really differentiate you as an advantage over competitors, and then use that as guidance, along with understanding whether your space is using AI, is not using AI, is expected to use AI, things like that, like current conditions versus your including your current resources and your core competencies as an advantage.
Right. You may decide when you look at your marketplace and the problem you're trying to solve, you may decide that there are additional core competencies you want to acquire or you need to acquire. And that's fair game too. You can say, hey, I'm missing XYZ. How do I go about acquiring those? I think that the trick for me is AI just for the sake of AI. Everybody today seems to need an AI story, but AI for the sake of AI is maybe not as valuable. What I'm really trying to do at the most basic level is I'm trying to solve important problems for my customers. And I might use AI to do that. I may not. And in fact, there might be other tools that work more effectively to do that. So that's the question to ask is, what's the problem I'm trying to solve? How well am I doing? And what are the other, alternatives? Right. And so, there's lots of examples of organizations that have a technology. And so they try to, well, there's a famous old quote, right? If all I have is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. Right. So that it's the same thing. I mean, we in marketing, we run into this too. You think about direct mail and people say, well, direct mail, isn't that old school? Why would I care about that? Well, direct mail is a tool. It's a marketing tool, just like social media or AdWords or door hangers or yard signs. I mean, they're all tools that all have have characteristics that can help us solve problems as marketers. And so for me, it's not always, do I use email or do I use yard signs? Well, a lot of times maybe I use both. I use some combination of those things, whatever it takes to move the customer through the customer journey and help solve their problem.
I think the one thing I would add to this that I think you guys are kind of saying, just the way that I hear this is, and so actually the way that I use AI in my job, which is mainly on the sales side, is to me, because AI does kind of bring everything back to the mean, right? Like you do lose a little of the creativity and obviously the human side of thinking when you're using AI. So what I personally use AI for is I know my strengths and then I use AI for my weaknesses. So you kind of were talking about that, but that's how I've been using AI. Just to move forward a little bit in the conversation, would like to talk about the marketing firm Zehr, because obviously part of our goal with the podcast is to highlight your business and what you do best. So would love for you to just tell us a little bit more about the business.
Sure. The idea of Zehr is that we automate the process of direct mail. So basically, you upload a document, you upload a list, see a preview what's going to be produced. You like what you see, you push the button, you're in the mail tomorrow, the next day at a fraction of the cost. So we do that mostly through automation. We do fulfillment through a network of production partners. We'll move the mail electronically as far as we can before we turn it into physical product. And then we actually produce letters, postcards, self-mailers, other product that shows up in your mailbox as U.S. postal mail. We also do a lot because we have this software platform. We're able to do other interesting things, like we get a job of 50,000 pieces. We can break it into slices and spread it out across the network in slices. Deliver some piece of it more rapidly, be able to have a failover, so there's no single point of failure, have virtually unlimited capacity. So we, create a production fabric, if you will, that spans the United States. And we've done a lot of work with that, a lot of different applications. The latest one we have is something called Speedy. And you can download a copy at www.zehrmail.com/speedy. It's a desktop application where you can, if you have a document, either of a Word file or PDF, you just drop it on Speedy, and it says, "Would you like to mail this?" You say, "Okay," and it turns it into a letter. It just shows up, and you give it an address, and it shows up as a letter in somebody's USPS mailbox, even a single letter. And the first 2 letters are free, no credit card required. So I think everybody should give it a try. And of course, we come back to, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, speaking of everybody, who is the target market for Zehr Mail?
So there's 2 different products we're talking about. So Zehr Mail, the target of Zehr Mail, unlike a lot of direct mail people, companies, we tend to focus, we get a lot of, we have a lot of demand for first-class mail rather than standard A. There's different classes of postage and that have different levels of service. And I won't, would spend a ton of time with your audience on that. But first-class mail is basically what you would buy at the post office if you went in to get a retail postage stamp. 3-day delivery anywhere in the U.S., pretty much. Of course, we automate things, so we get postal discounts on that, and everything's electronic in our interaction with the U.S. Postal Service. But the reason for that is that our specialty is really fast turnarounds. So we're faster, easier, more reliable. We already talked about how easy it is to upload a piece, approve a piece, mail a piece. It literally takes 60 seconds to launch a campaign. Most people don't even know how to do a direct mail campaign. So it makes it faster, easier, and more reliable because of the network. Our customers are typically, our largest customers are typically people where mail is strategic to their business. They need to be, maybe they're driving demand to a call center or, some other kind of a sales office. They're going to do 30,000 to 50,000 pieces of mail, maybe 1 to 3 times a week. And fast delivery is really important. Trackability, auditability, all of that stuff's really important. So that's what we do. We're a high performance mail platform. With that said, because we have automation, anybody could use it. I mean, we have lots of real estate agents using it, and independent insurance agents, mortgage brokers, people like that. And they're able to take advantage or leverage the volume that it comes through the platform from some of our other customers. So that's the core Zehr Mail product. And, if anybody's doing mailing, especially in the real estate industry, people are doing just listed postcards. There we have people looking for houses, certain neighborhoods. Certainly we can automate all of that stuff. We'll do it faster, easier, less expensively than probably anybody else you're going to work with. But the Speedy product is interesting because, anybody who has a letter could use it. You could use it, or Alex could use it, if you had a PDF, or, you want to send grandma a birthday card, you could use it for that. It wouldn't cost you anything to do that. But it was really designed to address the postal meter industry so that the postal meter, maybe take some explanation. Are you familiar with that? What a postal meter is?
No.
Yeah, no, it's a funny artifact, right? The industry is owned pretty much by a company called Pitney Bowes. They've been around for 100 plus years. And the idea is that postage is money. You can take a U.S. postage stamp. You have to pay cash for it. Postal Service doesn't give credit to anybody. It's the U.S. government. And you could trade stamps in for money too, I believe. So for large companies who are doing a lot of mail, postage looks like money. They needed a way to manage it. So they created something called a postal meter. In the old days, you would take this module, you'd take it to the Postal Service, and they'd put money on it. You'd pay money, they'd give credit in this module, and then you would use that in your mailroom when you're doing mailings to put postage on envelopes. Now, technology's evolved to the point where these postal meters, and you can look up U.S. Postal Meter Pitney Bowes, online to see a picture of what that looks like. But nowadays you can use the internet to charge about, put postage on them dynamically, or electronically and dynamically. But still, it disregards the reality that most of the problem that people are having is not postage. People know where to get stamps. I mean, you could get stamps. You can get stamps at Safeway today. You just ask for a book of 12 when you're checking out, or a book of I can't remember the right quantity, but you can get a book of stamps at Safeway when you check out. I mean, it's that ubiquitous. But the problem with sending a letter is that you have to compose a letter, then you have to print it, you have to fold it, you have to put it in an envelope, you have to address it. You have to find the address, and then you can put a stamp on it, which is the easy part, and then you have to get it in a mailbox. And then you maybe it's delivered, maybe it's not. How would you know? I mean, unless maybe the person will call you back. But with a product like Speedy, you're going to compose a letter, you drop it, we turn it into mail. We track it for you, so we show it as it's being processed, printed, mailed, delivered, and we'll send you an email confirmation when it's delivered. And it's all done super fast and easy, and in some cases at no cost at all.
I'm sure my mom would like to see a letter from me, especially if it's in a way. So I will take you up on that, the free one, the free two, I guess you said.
Well, you mentioned too, Josh, you mentioned you were in sales, right? So in old school enterprise sales, which is where I've spent a portion of my career, I mean, it's not very unusual once you have a call with a client to sit down and write them a little note. Hey, it was great to see you. Here's what I think we talked about. Here's how I think we can help you. Hey, we're looking forward to talking to you in a couple of weeks. And just draw it out, write out a little card and drop it in the mail. I remember doing that. With a tool like this, it becomes very easy.
Well, and I think with where sales is getting away from that, I think there's more value to that. Alex, anything before we wrap up?
No, that was great.
Yeah. Cool. So as we come up to the end of the episode, I just want to give you an opportunity to mention how people can find you and anything else you'd like to end with.
Oh, yeah, you can find us online, www.zehrmail.com. Zehrmail is like airmail, the word airmail with a Z on the front. And if you do /Speedy, you can download the app and give it a try. We'd appreciate that. If you want to see, you want to connect to me on LinkedIn, I'm always available, www.linkedin.in.wilsonzehr. You can see my academic portfolio online. I'm always happy to collaborate, talk about problems, talk about issues. If you've got questions, even if it has nothing to do with direct mail, shoot it over and let's talk about it. I'm always interested in learning and helping.
Which I think we learned on this episode by hitting, 3 or 4 completely different topics that I thought were all really valuable. But thank you so much for coming on the show. And for those of you who've learned something new from this episode, please consider giving us a like or a follow so we can continue getting the highest quality of guests. And as always, thank you for listening. Wilson, I really enjoyed this. This is more academic than we usually get into, and I personally loved it. So I think this episode very much has its own niche of listeners. So thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. And always open to connecting, to helping. Just let me know what I can do.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast. I hope you got a ton of value out of this episode. And before we go, I just want to thank our sponsors, DevNoodle. DevNoodle provides marketing agencies with the ability to offer their clients unlimited website design, build, and management services with fixed monthly plans. If website design, development, and maintenance is holding your agency back from growing, please reach out to us at devnoodle.com, where we make websites easy for you and easy for your clients. devnoodle.com.